Hi, I'm Joe Bergamini, and I'm on Musicians on the Record. Hit it.
This is huge, musicians on the record. Bring it on.
Welcome to the show, Joe. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So I was realizing, looking around my drum studio and my house, that I got a lot of stuff with your name on it here, namely drum books. And let me show you, for one, the drum techniques of Led Zeppelin. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. That's your transcription, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
It's awesome. And it helps Luddites like me learn how to read music better. So thank you for that. And then you've got the pedal control with you and Dom, right? And Stephen Chamberlain, correct?
Stefan from Quebec City. He's in New York a lot now, but yep.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And I'm not sure you're on the DVD version, but I know you're in the book version of the Neil Peart, taking center stage.
Let's see. Here it is. The book version.
Wow, that's fantastic. Can we start with talking a little bit about what's that like? Did you get to work directly with Neil, and what was that whole experience like?
Actually, so the books, we can come back to books. That's just a few of the ones I've been involved with. It's the publishing world's become something I become pretty deeply involved with. Yeah. And a lot of it, just to give you a little backstory, started with Dom. I worked with Dom on his classic book, It's Your Move, which is his main book.
Yeah.
And, Dom was my drum teacher for 6 years when I was younger, right out of my college years and right after. And so he asked me to work on that book with him. And I studied to be an architect. So my background, I have a bachelor's degree in architecture. So I was always into design and graphics. And so I basically learned how to do that on the fly. Dom sort of, is always great about helping out younger drummers.
Yeah.
And, this guy looks like he might be able to figure this out. So I did It's Your Move. And the reason It's Your Move, if you check out that book out, it looks so unique. I did not know what I was doing. I mean, I designed the whole music font. I moved every note head. And I mean, I can't even it's painful for me to think of how much time that took.
Right.
So anyway, I did that with Dom, and so then we started working on projects together, which culminated in us now owning a company called Wisdom Media, which is a publisher. We're distributed by Alfred.
Nice.
And we have about a dozen books out. It's wisdom-media.com, and it's really fun because we get to help out a lot of drummers.
Yeah.
After I started writing more, I got published as a columnist in Modern Drummer, and then from going to the NAMM shows and everything, I met up with not only the guys at Modern Drummer, but some of the people at the time at Warner Brothers. And that led to me getting asked to do the Zeppelin book, which you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I also did a transcription book that came out in, I think, 2002 called MD Classic Tracks with Modern Drummer.
Great.
I'll show you that one.
Yeah.
Looks like this.
Fantastic. Yes.
I'm still really, really proud of this one. I transcribed one song each from Carter Beauford, John Bonham, Terry Bozzio, Vinnie Colaiuta, Phil Collins, Stuart Copeland, Steve Gadd, Keith Moon, Neil Peart, Simon Phillips, Jeff Porcaro, Mike Portnoy, and Steve Smith.
Wow.
Pretty much listing my favorite drummers.
Right.
And Modern Drummer asked me to do that, so that was a real thrill. I got to work with Ron Spagnardi and Bill Miller, who were friends, especially Bill before they passed away. So that was it's a great memory. And through being involved with all the publishing world, I eventually got asked to become a drum editor, which is the person who sort of supervises the drum division of a music publisher. And in that gig, you handle producing projects, doing some editing, acquisitions. So you talk to the artists, and I got asked I have a good friend, Chris Scialfa, who is a really good musician from the New Jersey scene. He invited me to come and interview with the president of Carl Fisher, which is a really classic old music publisher, to become their editor. So I went down, and the gentleman hired me as their editor.
Wow.
I did a couple of books with them too. You want to see those?
Absolutely, want to see them all, Joe. Absolutely.
Okay, so I handled a lot of projects there. I actually learned how to produce a DVD. They gave me the chance to learn on the job because I really didn't know what a drum editor was. But the projects I did myself with them were I started off doing a book with Scott Rockenfield from Queensryche called Operation Rockenfield, and then I did a book with Jason Bittner.
Yes, he's an amazing drummer.
Yep, terrific. This is called Drumming Out of the Shadows. These are transcriptions sort of with interviews and a lot of cool pictures like fan books. And then I did a book with Chris Penny called Polyrhythmic Potential.
Wow.
And it was kind of like the series I was going through with Carl Fisher. And it was a pleasure. All three of those guys have become friends, and they're great guys. All this led me to getting the job as an editor with Hudson Music. And once I got with Hudson Music, then, obviously they were already working with all the world's greatest drummers. So
sure.
In the course of working with Hudson, I've worked with Keith Carlock. I can't even list them all. Russ Miller, Steve Smith, Steve Gadd.
Yeah.
Aaron Spears, Spanky. And these guys have become friends. And I look at it like I got free lessons from these guys.
Right.
And then Rob Wallace and I, who was the owner of Hudson Music, I helped him develop the app Drum Guru. So through all that, it's been just an amazing ride. But I would say probably the most surreal thing about it, besides being like a dream come true job for me, because I love to transcribe, I love to write, was becoming good friends with both Steve Smith and Neil Peart, who were my, Neil, of course, I worshiped Neil as a kid.
Sure.
And he was my hero. So, so getting back to, your question, I had been working with Hudson for a couple of years, and I knew that they were friends with Neil. They had already done his previous projects, but I know Neil. I'm a big enough fan to know his privacy and how reclusive he is, and so I never even mentioned his name. I was like, you know what? I mean, even if they were to do a project with him, they certainly wouldn't let fanboy near him.
Right, yeah.
And happily, I turned out to be extremely wrong about that.
Yeah.
So Neil expressed interest in doing a project, and basically I wrote proposals for him, and then in a series of degrees I was brought closer to him to where eventually he was, okay, I'll meet with him and see if I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
And over the course of time, I think like when I first met him, I finally took my old man's advice for one day in my life, better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. So we hit it off, and he was comfortable, and we wound up working on the DVD. And the thing I love about the DVD is that I got to sit with Neil and ask him about all those classic drum parts all throughout his whole career.
Wow.
I'm a huge fan of them, and a lot of the guys my age, they kind of drop off after the album Signals or something, Under Pressure. I actually am a fan of all of that. I was in a Rush cover band for 10 years.
Wow, great.
So we when Neil wrote his story about working on the DVD, he said when he actually mentioned to me in one of his books, which is crazy. Like kind of like you're part of the story that you've been reading since you were a little kid.
Yeah, that must.
It's mind blowing. Yeah. And he wrote in there. So they introduced me to this young editor who plays on Broadway, and his name's Joe, and he has how did he put it? He has a frightening degree of familiarity with my work.
So he felt the fanboy coming out as well.
Well, you know what? The thing that's really cool that I found out about Neil and is that he actually really loves that people appreciate his work. Sure. Like he totally I'm a pro drummer now. I do a lot of different things, and I just happen to really enjoy his work. I know it quite well. Yeah. I get off the bus at all the I'm not like a fan worshiper. I'm not. Yeah. I don't care what his favorite color is. I could care less. I just like his work. Right. And so happily, he's a terrific guy. He's very private. Yeah. But he's just as smart as everybody thinks, and he's just as cool as you might think, and he's super nice, and he's very accommodating when he decides to work on something. He won't do something unless he can do it 110%. Yeah. And so getting to do the video with him and the book with him was like pretty much the dream come true. So
sounds it, yeah. I mean, it really sounds amazing, and of course, he started being a fanboy as well with Keith Moon. He talks about and Zeppelin and all of those guys. So it just goes from generation to generation, it seems. So yeah. Can we start a little bit with how did your passion for music even start?
Well, it's pretty simple actually. I was in about the 7th grade. I came from sort of old-fashioned Italian upbringing, but my parents are not musicians.
Okay.
There were some other musicians in the family somewhere, but my dad, listened to country music on the radio, but he really didn't. They really didn't. My parents, my sister, who was a year younger than me, got piano lessons, and brother and I were expected to play sports. And I was the smallest, wimpiest kid in my class, and I was terrible at sports. Okay. I liked music. I started sort of like listening with my sister at the time. My sister had Thriller and Synchronicity and a couple of other albums, and then I was into like Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath and Metallica, and I was like, that music sucks. Like, that's stupid. Oh my god! But anyway, one day I got my mom to get me a radio. Mm-hmm. And because at the time, everybody had those notebooks with things written on them. Yeah. And my friend, all the cool kids had things written on their books, like Black Sabbath, The Doors, Led Zeppelin, Motley Crue. I was like, wow, like all the cool kids like this stuff. So I got this radio, and I used to put in a cassette and just press record because I wanted to hear back something if I liked it. Yeah. And the first day I put the radio on after I got it, I happened to capture the song "Subdivisions" by Rush on the radio. Yeah. And after I listened to it about a dozen times in a row, I was like, Mom, I want to play the drums.
Wow.
And that was it. Like,
was it?
That's pretty much what happened. I mean, I think there was a Van Halen song too that also helped trigger it. But
do you remember which one?
Yeah, "Dance the Night Away."
Oh, great. Yeah.
So pretty much from there on, I was like, my parents being the practical people they were like, you have to take lessons, and if you stick with the lessons for a month, then we'll get a drum set. So I took the lessons for a month. Then they're like, great, you can get a drum set, but we don't have any money, so I had to get a paper route, and I saved up my money. And then once I had the drum set in 7th grade, pretty much, I mean, every single day of my school life until I started college, I pretty much played the drums for like 3 hours at least every single day.
Wow.
And I played along to, a lot of Rush, obviously. Like I knew, when I joined the cover band, like I didn't even have to go over anything from 10 years before. I knew it all already, sort of.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but a lot of it.
Sure.
But interestingly, like I made a good move, which I didn't really know that I was making a good move. But like if I liked the song, I just loved playing along to it. Mm. So I happened to like a lot of music that had really simple drum parts. Like like at the time, ZZ Top's Eliminator was really big. Yeah. I remember Twisted Sister was big. I played along to a lot of Ozzy, a lot of Dio, a lot of Iron Maiden. Those are like cool drum parts, but not as hard as Rush.
Right.
But some of the like the ZZ Top and some of that stuff, like I can remember playing along to Sharp Dressed Man and enjoying it just as much. And now with what I do now, working in New York and Broadway and everything, like the whole gig is to make the other people comfortable. Mm. And so by playing along to those simple groove recordings as a young player, I was really like, instilling in myself a sense of groove. And as a teacher, I've noticed that now. I get a lot of young students who are really inspired. They're still inspired by Bonham and Neil.
Sure. Sure. Right.
But a lot of the times they don't. There's a lot to be gained from playing along with something simple. Play along with Billy Dean. Yeah. And sometimes when young students don't do that, they wind up a little deficient in the time department. Yeah. And you can't do this and be deficient in the time department.
Right.
So yeah.
I mean, you're such an amazing teacher, and you're a large part of your career is being a teacher. How did that part start for you? Because it sounds like there was a lot of self-taught time of just playing along to these songs. How did that start for you? But also, who were the important teachers for you that came along?
Right. Great question. So I had 3 drum teachers when I was in high school, and right from 7th, 8th, and 9th grade into 10th grade, the first two, I don't really remember that much, but the lessons were sort of helpful. But then I had a guy named Tim Soluk. He lives in Houston. He's still active. I'm not in that much touch with him anymore, but I really connected with him. He was super nice to me, and he was the first one that would help me with a Rush song or whatever. And we really hit it off. And he gave me a lot of good advice. And he was the guy who said, hey, why don't you go to Sam Ashen if you're, because I wanted to buy a Tama kit.
Yeah.
And so he kind of talked me through all that. And then he moved away, and I remained self-taught then throughout high school.
Okay.
But I did every activity. I did the marching band, I did the jazz band, I did the pit band. I actually played in the pit orchestras, and I was like, wow, like I'm meeting all these cool, weird kids, and this is fun playing in the pit. Like that, I had no idea what it was about. They kind of recruited me, and I sort of had this like distant fascination with Broadway. I was like, wow, that must be so cool going in the pit, but I mean, I can never do that. I mean, I can't read and play all those other instruments. It wasn't even a goal of mine. I figured it was so far out of reach. It's funny how life works out sometimes.
Right.
So, but all that stuff really helped out. And then I was always in a band, always playing in a garage band, always having gigs, battle of the bands. If my class had a fundraiser, I was like, oh, you guys are having a bake sale? You definitely need a band for that.
Absolutely.
So I was playing constantly, and it was at a battle of the bands here in New Jersey, where a gentleman who used to work for Tama, who's a really well-known sales rep in the business named Al Marinaro, who reps many big companies. He's not known to the public, but in the business, people know him.
Yeah.
He was judging the contest, and he said, excuse me, young man, you're in band number 3, the drummer, right? And I said, yeah. And he's like, well, I'm with Tama Drums. So I like my girlfriend, I kind of dropped her on the floor.
Yeah.
And he said, you have a lot of potential. You sound great. You should study with my friend, Dom Famularo.
Wow.
And I, and then he gave me Dom's phone number. And I had been reading Modern Drummer since I was in the 7th grade.
Yeah.
And I had seen his name. I never even came remotely close to meeting anyone famous or well-known. Or
sure.
And I went to see Rush. My dad, we had the very last row at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And I was like blown away that I'm in the same row with him. Man.
Right.
Me and 20,000 of my friends, man.
Yeah.
So me and so seeing I had the phone number of a guy that I read his name in Modern Drummer.
Yeah.
I couldn't freaking believe it, and so that began first with my dad going with me, and then eventually 6 years of me going out to study with Dom.
That's amazing.
And so he was a number one of my teaching, and he was the one who said, well, what are you going to do when you get done with this architecture school thing? And I'm like, well, I'd like to be a drummer. And he said, well, I think you're capable of it, and you should do a little teaching. And so I had never really thought about it, but I thought, he had sent me for lessons while I was studying with him. David Garibaldi came through town.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And I took a couple of lessons with David.
Wow.
I only took a couple. He's become a good friend too, and he's recovering from an accident right now.
Yes, I was wondering if he's doing okay, and his bass player as well is recovering.
Yeah, the bass player was hurt much worse, but Dave's going to be okay.
Good.
But I was really worried, obviously.
Yeah, of course, sure.
But the 2 lessons he gave me, ripped my face off.
Yeah.
He made it clear to me that I had some things I really needed to get together. And then Dom sent me to a couple other guys. I had a lesson with Kenny Aronoff. That was fun. Carmine Appice. That was cool.
Wow.
And then this other fellow, Willie Ornelas, who's an LA studio drummer, and he kind of pretended to be a producer and put me in the spot of the drummer.
Interesting.
And Willie said to me something very intelligent and very sort of predicting of the future for me.
Yeah.
He said, and studying with Dom, Dom got me into Garibaldi and Gadd and Cobham.
Sure.
And I was just studying chops, and I had rebelled against Neil. I was like, Neil's simpleton, man. And I want to play Mahavishnu or something.
Right, right, good.